To the big story then, dominating football this weekend, and Chelsea have this afternoon suspended 4 fans from attending matches following allegations of racial abuse towards Raheem Sterling. Gary, what's your take on this issue?
Out of obviously a negative, I think it's a big positive. I think yesterday when I saw it break on social media, I saw Raheem's statement. It's provoked a huge reaction from everybody. And thinking, obviously, I was coming on this programme tonight, started thinking, reflect about my experiences with Raheem in terms of obviously working with him for 4 years with England. And actually, I had a personal experience in 2016 directly with him and felt as though, to be fair, it was breaching player, coach confidence of, you know, what happened. So I actually rang up and asked him whether I could actually speak about it, because I thought it was important that he didn't feel like I'd breached his confidence. But I think it's actually the right thing to do. He came to see me one-on-one in 2016. I think it was 3 or 4 days before the Iceland game. Pre-tournament, I don't know if you'll remember, he was getting absolutely battered going into that tournament, getting so much stick. We were aware of that, obviously, within the coaching staff, that, you know, fans were onto him, the media were onto him, asking a lot of questions about him. It then continued into the tournament, into the stadiums, to the point whereby there were those groans and those sort of little boos and little things. And it takes a lot for a player to come and see a coach. And he actually came, I was in the analysis room, and I remember the analyst leaving, and he walked in. And to be fair, just started to download on me, why was this happening? Why was this so personally accepted? That he would get criticism playing for England for his performance levels. He accepted that he would be scrutinised as an England player. He didn't want any special treatment. But that it was so vicious, he felt so targeted, he didn't know what to do about it. I saw what I felt was somebody who has got a great mentality and is tough, but also a level of vulnerability in terms of how does he deal with this, how does he cope with it, how does he come out of it. Really, as a coach, to be fair, me, being honest with you now and reflecting on it even yesterday, thinking I didn't really know how to deal with it. I went into what would be protective mode, coach mode. You know, one of our most important players, how do you get him ready for the next match? You know, Raheem, you're a great player, we love you to bits, which, to be fair, we did. As a coaching staff, you know, he played nearly all the games for us. And trying to sort of patch him up, really, to get him to a point whereby you were never really dealing with the sort of what would be underlying issue. And maybe you never would be able to in that sort of one session. But actually, you know, reflecting now, maybe even brushing it aside a little bit, as being honest with you, thinking, you know, Raheem, you're strong, you know, that's why you're playing for England, you're good enough, you've played all your career, you know, it's happened to players before you, but really deep down understanding that there was a level, there was a tonal difference to the actual attacks that he was getting compared to others. And directly in that tournament, Harry Kane, who is rightly, you know, he's the blue-eyed boy of English football, he's a sensational player, we love him to bits. He was having a difficult time in that tournament. And it was portrayed it was because he was on corners. Raheem was having a difficult time, and it was because of other reasons and more personal reasons at times. And the language used towards him was difficult. And I don't think he could understand. I think he was asking me why this was happening. And then post-tournament, we got knocked out, and obviously it was bad from a football point of view. But the abuse that he received, particularly in the media, beyond that tournament, and the language that was used against him, I've not seen it before, and I've seen some, you know, I've seen the sort of, I've lived closely with David Beckham, with Wayne Rooney, played in Euro 96 and for a few years with Paul Gascoigne. I've seen a lot over the years, but the nastiness that I think is there, and look back upon that time now and think, you know, really, you know, was I walking, you know, you think about walking by on the other side and not dealing with the real issue, trying to sort of patch him up and going, is that the right reaction? But he was willing to stand up and go out and carry on playing. He has continued to go on and play at an outstanding level. But he's been carrying this now for years. This is not just yesterday. This is not just a Chelsea fan at the weekend. This has been going on for years with him. And I've known about this for years because he came to see me in 2016. So was it happening before that even? And it's a really difficult situation, and one that, to be fair, you think, how would I deal with that again if I was put in that situation? How would I try and help him? Because he's a tough lad, he's a tough cookie in terms of the way he is, to come through everything he's coming through, and the scrutiny he comes through, to perform like he has done, is a miracle almost.
What's your insight, Jamie? This is a player that you, of course, shared a dressing room with at Liverpool.
Yeah, I was there with Raheem as a young kid, and I sometimes think of Raheem. I mean, listen, we love our football, but in this country, there's 50, 60 million people in the country. There's probably 5 to 10 million people who watch live games, highlights, whatever it may be. What is the perception of Raheem Sterling in this country from the majority of people who buy papers, read media stuff online? The perception is of a young, flash, black kid from London, really. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that maybe he moved on from Liverpool. The perception that he's more interested in cars, jewellery, maybe nightclubs than his actual football. Anyone reading that, anyone writing that, I can assure you that is absolute, utter nonsense garbage. Raheem Sterling's a mouse. And I can't even remember really speaking to him so much at Liverpool. He didn't really speak. He was so quiet. He got on with his training. He wasn't loud in the dressing room. He wasn't late. He wasn't going on nights out. He was just a young kid who was very humble, who come in and trained very well. And I go back to the leaving Liverpool thing, because I don't think there was anything there before that. I think Liverpool and other clubs are seen as the establishment. And then probably Chelsea 10 years ago, and certainly City now are seen as the new kids on the block. They got the money, they're throwing the money about. And I think when he made that move, I think a lot of it come from that. That's what it was seen as. Now, I was very critical of Raheem Sterling at that time, and I thought he made mistakes. Maybe more the people who were around him. But he's never been able to shake that off, this tag of being more interested in money and different things and flashness. And the fact is, his life is put out there. He buys a house for his mother. He might buy a car. He might buy a ring. Whatever it may be, that is always the story around Raheem Sterling.
Do you think all that then, the way that he is almost portrayed, do you think that does have racial undertones?
Yes, I think it does. I think there's no doubt about that. That is the debate now. Listen, we know what happens on the weekend. The debate now is the stuff in the media, online, racial. Now, there's people are arguing for and against it. I actually think there are undertones there of racism, no doubt, about that. I actually go back to when I was a kid, and I can only remember mid-80s. OK, I know racism went on before, that was probably worse. But from 30 years ago, the famous picture is John Barnes backheeling a banana away in the Merseyside derby. I was at that game, so I grew up in that environment. That was 30 years ago. I don't think we should also forget we've come a long way since then, but obviously not far enough from what happened at the weekend. And the one thing I thought, and you're thinking about actual change, is that game was live on TV. Social media, as soon as someone's saying it, it goes everywhere. The one worry I have, and I hope I'm wrong, but if that was at 3 o'clock on a Saturday and the game wasn't live, and maybe that it wasn't picked up as much, the big problem you have in terms of actual changes is this actually getting accepted by people around the guy who's saying it. Until that happens, I don't think it can change, because you can't stop one guy shouting a comment. But if he's actually getting outed in the stadium, not just him, because this is going on at stadiums all around the place. We obviously had an incident last week with Arsenal. I think until that happens, where people actually feeling comfortable themselves in a stadium, shouting racist abuse or other abuse, that's when you might finally actually stamp it out.
What can we do? This is racism we're dealing with.
I would go further, and to be fair, and I've thought about it probably more in the last 24 hours than I probably ever have done. There have been times on this show when we've avoided taking on this subject, actually. But Raheem Sterling, what he did yesterday, has forced us to take it on. So that's a start. I think it's not undertones, it's blatant, actually. And I started to think about whether it happened to anybody whilst I was playing with England, and the lad that I used to sit next to in the changing room for 10 years, Ashley Cole. Actually, out of the golden generation, he was the only one that actually I could say was actually world class, you know, in his position. He's had to escape this country. He's almost like a football refugee, you know, seeking asylum in the MLS to get away from it, the way in which he's been treated. And I think over the last few days, I've heard people mention, well, yeah, Gaza got stick, and David Beckham got stick, and Wayne Rooney got stick. And I lived closely to two of those lads in terms of witnessing it, and it was horrific, the stick, the vilification that they got when it was bad or when they made mistakes. But do you know when it was good for them? They were hero worshipped. When it's good for Ashley Cole or Raheem Sterling, they can't get the hero worship. I think they would never accept the racism. But talking about, is it actually undertones? No, I think it's blatant, because
the actual media.
When you talk about football performance, I think for Gaza, he was hero worship when it was good. For David Beckham, he was hero worship when it was good. So missing the point around when it was bad, they all got stick. Yeah, they did. But when it was good for those lads, Becks, Wazza, Gaza, it was unbelievable for them. They were up here. For Ashley Cole, when it was good and he was playing and being world class, or when Raheem Sterling's at that level, it doesn't get as good. They don't get the appreciation. So actually, when you look at the evidence, and even look back at my time with England, when Ricky Lambert scored that goal, or when Jamie Vardy came into the team, oh, he's one of ours. It wasn't like that when Danny Welbeck came into the squad, or when, say, Marcus Rashford came into the squad. It's only the last 24. The evidence actually is quite heavy when you start to look at it in terms of the appreciation of what would be the black players versus the white players that play for England. And I'm part of the problem. I'm not sitting here and saying that, because I've witnessed this. I've sat there and been in changing rooms. I've sat there and been coaches and seen a lot of this. I grew up in the mid-80s in the north of England, where you are surrounded by racism. Let's not be, or racist attitudes. And it has changed a lot in the last 40 years, don't get me wrong, but nowhere near far enough. But what I would say is I don't think it's a case of is it that? Yeah, it is. It is there.
So what do we do about it? And what you're saying is we are, in a sense, part of the problem. If we haven't spoken about these issues before, then absolutely we should have done. But what can we do moving forward?
I think what Raheem Sterling did yesterday, to be honest with you, actually, I'm just imagining Raheem Sterling, because I spoke to him yesterday and I never asked him the question because it's not for me to ask him. I wouldn't pretend to know him like the back of my hand in terms of, deep friend of his or anything like that. But I can imagine as he was writing that message, he'll have thought long and hard about pressing that button, send, because he'll have thought, what will this bring me? And actually, to be fair, it's brought him, and everyone's reacted in the right way to it, because it started the debate. The question you're asking is what happens beyond today, beyond Raheem's message. I suppose Dave, we're at a moment where every time I turn the news on, it's about Brexit. Brexit was fought largely on an issue of immigration and mentioned a lot. You see the news all the time, you see kids that are refugees trying to get into America are getting tear gassed. There's a lot of issues around this. This is sort of not just... There's 600 odd MPs in the Houses of Parliament who don't, probably 95% of them don't represent sort of this country or us or what we are. I think it's a massive problem in terms of sort of what would be society. Now, what can football do? It can show zero tolerance. So what Chelsea have done today, I think, absolutely is welcome in terms of those people should never set foot in a football stadium again. And the reality of it is that's the only way in which it can be used. It's basically zero tolerance. I think empowering black players to do what Raheem did yesterday. Raheem was strong enough to come out of it. Raheem's been strong enough to come out of it. His mentality is incredible. He's made it through what would be the 3 years of horror, media intrusion, scrutiny, vilification. And had his best ever season last year. And he's a star, in some ways, to everybody. So actually, I think empowering sort of other people to come out, and then actually us having the debate on here, because there have been times in the last 5, 6 years where you do sometimes think, do we go into this one? And no, we have to. Absolutely. So the fact that we're now talking about it on here is a good thing as well. And hopefully more honesty, more education for me, you, everybody. Education and tolerance, and zero tolerance, but also tolerance of other people.
Just to confirm, 4 Chelsea fans have been suspended from watching further games while investigations continue.